It's a Tuesday, which means here on the Get You Home show, we are joined by my good friend, Dr. Richard Scott, GP. Hello, Richard.
Good to be back. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. We're plodding forwards. You know, when life throws you a bunch of stuff, you just keep making little steps until you keep making progress.
Very true. Very true.
Right. So we said last time that we were going to be looking at fasting this week. Fasting, just in case that word means a little bit less to you, fasting is not eating food, not going quicker, just to be clear. Go for it, mate.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks very much. Again, yeah, we picked fasting. I say fasting because I'm down south. Andy fasting. It's the same thing. And we picked it because it's another hot topic. It's in the news. And it's one, to be honest, a bit like cold dipping that may not immediately appeal to everyone. It's hard. However, there seem to be benefits. So what we're going to look at as ever is, what are the benefits? What does the science say? What's been claimed? What's the biblical angle on fasting? I was reminded actually when I was doing my little spiel here that someone once said that man only discovers what God reveals. And I think that's one of the lovely things about this program generally is that science is discovering stuff which God has made plain for many years, maybe thousands of years, but we're sort of just understanding what it's all about. So and I think he gives us our brain. So in a sense, he's revealing to us um, what he's made and why he's made it. So that's what we're going to look at today: fasting benefits, any downsides, what does the Bible say? So I just wanted to start with some personal memories because I've got some people I've known over the years who've been good fasters. I might say I'm not. I'm an occasional faster, and this talk is challenging me, not as well as other people I hope. But here are the ones that I've covered. So there's a Kenyan pastor I work with. In fact, I will be working with again next month in Kenya, David Coretto, who once fasted for 40 days, just like Jesus did in the wilderness. Yes, he was absolutely spiritually on fire, and I might say he lost 4 stone because that is a proper fast, absolutely extreme. That's not, by the way, what we're talking about tonight, but I'm just showing you what's possible, not just for Jesus, but for, if you like, normal people. Jesus was God as well as man. So he was an extreme example, a bit like Wim Hof, the Iceman, and his cold dips. Top of the range, but that's not where we're going today. We're looking really at what's possible for the ordinary, normal person, dare I
Us
say,
mere mortals.
us mere mortals. So, second illustration, which was also very impressive. I had a prayer partner for some years called Andy, another Andy, Andy C. And we would pray together before work on a Wednesday. I'd go around his house and I'd make a cup of tea. He'd only have hot water. And after a time, I thought, do you only drink hot water? And he didn't tell me. He said, well, actually, I hadn't told me before. Yeah, I fast on Wednesdays. I only have water on Wednesdays, 24 hours, every week. And he'd done it for years. And I thought, oh my goodness, that hats off. That's a regular, proper fast. Again, this is what's possible. And he was very much a man of God. And more recently, up in the Midlands, my daughter Grace, her church, had a bit of a fast in January, and the minister thought he to need it. So he fasted for a month, and his technique, if you like, was to have only milk. So he drank milk only for 1 month. In fact, we met him 3 weeks in. He was dedicating one of our youngest grandson, and there he was. We were all eating cake, and as you do, and sandwiches, and he's on the milk. Hard in a party situation, but that's what he pledged. And Heather said she'd been at the church a few times in that time, and wow, was he on the ball spiritually? We'll come back to in a second. And finally, of course, those of us who are aware of what's going on beyond Christianity, this is Ramadan. We've got Ramadan starting for Muslims on the 10th. And 3 days ago, we've got Muslim partners. I saw one of the ladies in our practice yesterday. And there she was, because the sun had just gone down, eating and drinking for the first time since the previous day. And, it's hard. So, if you like, for a swathe of the population, fasting is a normal part of their lives for a month every year. So, if you like, we've got long-term stuff. We've got Ramadan for years. We've also got hot topics. What does the science say? And what's in it for Christians? Well, I thought I'd start with a definition. Andy had a go earlier. It's absolutely right. But actually, it does mean strictly abstaining from food and drink for a period of time. And it can be full abstinence. That's what the Muslims do during daylight hours. But to be honest, most definitions these days allow for low calorie drinks during your fasting period. So that can be water, it can be unsweetened black coffee or black tea. So no milk, no sugar. So that's the definition. Some people will have nothing, others, yeah, a bit like my friend Andy on the Andy C on the water. That was the way they got around the dehydration aspect. So the next question really is, how long should we fast? And this is a big one. Some will fast for a whole day, so 24 hours, like Andy. And that I would call a full fast. Some will, with practice, extend that to 3 days. I'm not recommending people go for 40, certainly straight off, but 1 day is reasonable. And that's a common way of doing it. But probably a more common way of fasting is what we call intermittent fasting, where you fast for part of a day, either 12 hours or 16 hours. And this is really becoming quite common. And 16-hour fast is often known as the 16/8 fast. So 16 hours you're fasting, 8 hours you're not. And of course, we can do this for a longer period of time because it's less stress on the body, but still has some positive health effects. I might say you need to do it for 12 hours, which by and mind includes sleep, isn't too tough. You know, if you finish eating at 7 at night and you don't have breakfast till 7 in the morning, well, there's your 12 hours. 16 hours is a little harder. So before we look at the medical side, I'm going to go for some more practicalities. Now, how should you begin? Say you want to do this fasting. We'll look at the benefits in a moment. How would you begin? Well, you can either simply go for it, like the full day fast, or a 12-hour or 16-hour, or you can do it slowly. And the science sometimes recommends cutting back, building up to it, if you like, or rather building down to it. Cutting back on food for a few days or even weeks before you go for the full fast. Your body's acclimatizing, isn't it? And then, of course, you have to choose, do you go for the full fast for a day or a partial fast, 12 hours or 16? They also say, have a snack to hand. You know, we're not being cruel here. If you become ill, faint, hypoglycemic, yeah, have a snack to hand. You know, we're not trying to kill people here. Yeah, but that said, is interestingly, in the same breath, the science says, well, actually, don't give up. Because it's too easy to say, oh, I feel a bit hungry. Ooh, where's that snack? Actually, that's one of the cardinal rules in fasting, is not to give up. So there's a balance, if you like, between self-protection if you're feeling really ill, but also, you know, you're wanting to achieve your goal, which is to abstain from food and drink. And here's the other thing, which I hadn't realised. Live life normally while you're fasting. So, for example, my Muslim doctor friends, they're working, which is quite hard. But they're managing it. No wonder they're so famished by the end after 10, 12-hour day. I remember vividly when I worked in Tanzania as a doctor, we worked in a village where there were half Muslims and half Christians. And so I was younger in those days. I used to play football when I could have a gap after work, say 5 till 6. And we'd bash around the football. And Christians and Muslims would play, even in Ramadan. So bear in mind, they're not having any food or any drink. And it's hot. And there they are, bombing up and down the pitch. But one of my most vivid memories is that behind one of the goals were some shrubs and nettles and stuff and prickles. Anyway, the ball went past the goal. And I sort of tried to find it and was in there for about 5 minutes, finding the ball, came out, turned around, everyone had gone. Because the sun had out. Even the Christians had gone because suddenly the game was over. The Muslims were desperate. The time was up. They could eat. And that football was over. So I turned around, I had the ball, but I had no opposition and no one to play with either. And it just reminded me that that's, in these, and that's another faith, but that's the way they worked. So fasting was a regular part of their lives. But live life normally whilst you're fasting. Now, what about the timing? So we've mentioned this 12 or 16-hour fast, 7 till 7 or 8 till 8, that gives you 12 hours. And that will give you a little benefit. 16 hours will be a little bit harder. And then the question is, well, do you go, say, 7 at night till lunchtime? Well, yes, but in fact, the weight loss, if you do it for weight loss, we'll come to the benefits in a second, seems to be better if you miss out supper. So you do it from, say, 4 p.m. until 8 a.m. That will give you your 16 hours. You've had your breakfast, you've had your lunch the first day, you miss supper, you go through to the next morning. That gives you your 16 hours. Now, the only thing is, Bear in mind, we've done a session, haven't we, Andy, on the benefits of sleep.
We have.
If you go to bed hungry, you might not sleep so well. So that might need a bit of adjustment. I'm not sure what I would do. Whether for me, I would perhaps have supper and then miss out on breakfast and wait till lunch the next day. But anyway, that gives you your 16-hour fast, and you can keep that going longer. So here we are. Let's look at the benefits. Why we're recommending this. Well, there are plenty. A bit like with the cold dips, it's hard, but it's worth it. Here's a few benefits: improved blood sugar control. We know that diabetes is becoming more and more common. Improved blood pressure, reduced inflammation, and weight loss. You reduce your body fat, less of a tummy. And other diseases, not just diabetes, but other diseases linked to obesity, go down. In fact, if you do a proper 3-day fast, which must be tough, I haven't done one, people say you lose between 4.5 and 12 pounds LBS, or between 2 and say 5 to 6 kilos, depending on how heavy you start. Why? Because the body burns fat. It starts at 12 hours, but particularly at 16 hours, you're burning fat because the body doesn't have sugar presented to it, but it needs energy. Particularly the brain needs energy, and you burn fat. And interestingly, this is something I learned, which I didn't know. 16 hours is a magic number, more than 12, because at 16 hours, the body also begins to destroy old and damaged cells. Now, this process is called autophagy. Now, auto means yourself. Phagy, Phagy, is a medical term for eating. So basically, the body, if you like, eats itself, but it only eats the bad bits, the old and damaged cells. And it recycles these cells. And this is the scientific basis behind inflammation and disease being improved. You're getting rid of old and damaged cells. So the science is discovering, as we mentioned earlier, just why what God has recommended in the past is good for us. Now, I think God particularly recommended it for the spiritual benefits. We'll come to the Bible in just a sec. But isn't it interesting? You get physical benefits as well. That's our generous God. He throws it in as a freebie. So just a few tips before we look at the Bible. Yeah, I mentioned, might want to reduce your intake for a bit before you fast, get used to it. And after you fast, by the way, don't rush straight into a full English breakfast. Your body's had a big shock. What you're meant to do, take it gently. Fruit, particularly recommended, lots of fluid in fruit, easy to digest. So just go a bit easy on yourself. Don't rush into it. And another tip, which is quite interesting, but logical if you think about it. Some people fast specifically to lose weight and don't achieve it. Well, why? Because they eat too much in the non-fasting period or eat a poor diet. The numbers, the calories still apply. So, you need to use your brain as well if you want to achieve it for losing weight. In a couple of interesting things. People who do it for religious reasons, like Muslims, for example, they can use toothpaste to brush your teeth as long as they don't swallow it. Otherwise, that's breaking the fast. Isn't that interesting? You might not have thought about that. So you can use toothpaste, but you can't swallow it. And you can shower as long as you don't drink the water. These are practicalities, especially in a hot country, maybe more than here. So there we are. That's what you're allowed, but just got to be careful with the toothpaste and the shower water. And the toothpaste is important because more than 12 hours of fasting, you can get bad breath. As you get ketotic, as you ketosis, it gives you bad breath. So, yeah, that's important. Now, are there any other downsides from fasting? Well, to be honest, yes. And this is some of the obvious things you might think. It's nice benefits with blood pressure and blood sugar, etc. But actually, you can get grumpy. I think we can understand that one. Irritable headaches, especially if you drop your blood sugar. Tired. And I think what's important is that one's aware of the potential downsides, so you don't give up when they occur. Oh, I've got a downside. I better stop. Well, hang on, not necessarily. You're only fasting for a time. Just be aware of it. And then, it's knowledge is king, isn't it, in these things? So I thought briefly I'd look at the scripture and then we can come back to any questions that you've got, Andy. I know you've had a big day, so I'll give you a bit of a rest for your brain today.
Thank you.
It's all right. Well, and I've got 6 brief points which I'll make from scripture in relation to why fasting is good for us. So first one, 2 Samuel 12. If you remember, King David had his adulterous affair with Bathsheba. It produces a child. God's judgment is the child becomes sick, and ultimately, sadly, the child dies. That was, that's the result of David's sin. And for the week before, when he learned the child was sick, David fasted. He refused food and drink. He lay on the floor in response to God's judgment. And that was, if you like, sorrow and guilt. So it was a response to knowing he'd done wrong. He denied himself food and drink and a bed to just lay on the floor. When the child had died, he got up, he washed his clothes. Importantly, he worshipped God, asking for forgiveness, and he ate. So the first time I found it was in 2 Samuel 12 as an expression of sorrow and penitence. I've done something badly wrong. I'm going to deny myself. And the second one was in Ezra, again in the Old Testament, Ezra chapter 8. I'd forgotten this one, but the Israelites were on their way back from exile in Babylon. But the road to Jerusalem was dangerous. There were bandits. And Ezra, on their behalf as the prophet, announced on behalf of all people, and he was the boss. So they were organized. We are all going to fast and humble ourselves. So not just fast, but humble ourselves before God, which I might say David obviously did as well. I'm asking for a safe trip. The Bible records that God answered their prayers. So the first one, if you like, was an expression of sorrow. In this case, it's praying for protection, fasting along with worship and humility, knowing that we're in trouble or potentially in trouble. Lord, protect us. Now, New Testament, of course, of Jesus in particular, had loads to say about fasting. I'm just going to summarize these very quickly. As we know, when he was in the wilderness for 40 days, he fasted. There was a lovely phrase in my Bible. It said, after 40 days, he was very hungry.
I love that one.
It's a bit like in Genesis when it says, God, and he made the stars. We can't even count them. There are trillions of stars out there, and he made the stars, about 5 words. Anyway, Jesus, and he was very hungry. Oh, yeah, I think he was. And then the angels fed him. But this was the beginning of his ministry. The devil tempted him, tried to get him to worship him. All this is yours. You just have to worship me. Turn these rocks into bread. You're hungry. Jesus would have none of it. He knew who he worshipped. And if you like, he was throwing down the gauntlet to the devil right at the beginning or before his ministry to show him who he was worshipping, who was in charge. It's God and not you. The principle there for us is that before ministry, maybe before a special event, fasting, good idea. Let's just, if you like, lay down the gauntlet, part of spiritual warfare, I would say. And then a little bit later in Matthew chapter 6. Actually, I don't know whether you've got a Bible there, Andy.
I do.
Matthew 6, 16 to 18 would be good.
I'll just look it up.
Yeah.
16 to 18. Okay, and when you fast, don't make it obvious, as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled, so people will admire them for their fasting. I tell you the truth, that it is the only reward they will ever get. But when you fast, comb your hair and wash your face. Then no one will notice that you are fasting, except your Father who knows what you do in private. And your Father who sees everything will reward you. Now,
isn't that interesting? I mean, we probably knew that passage to an extent, but what really occurred to me, the importance of not making a song and dance, and secondly, when we fast, and by the way, God is stating that we will, he's assuming that we'll fast. So again, challenged myself, when did I last fast? I'm going to fast as a result of this talk. No, I am. It's, this is speaking to me as well. But when you fast, God will reward you. I mean, why would we be rewarded by God? I mean, it'd be dumb, to be honest, not to be, wouldn't it? So let's just hold on to that one. So what we've had so far, first 4, if you like, are expression of sorrow, guilt, penitence. Number 2, for protection. Number 3, beginning of ministry, some special event perhaps. And number 4, it should be a regular. Expects it to be a regular activity. A bit like my friend Andy C, who fasted every week. Number 5, in Luke 5, Jesus was questioned. And people said to him, how come your followers are eating and drinking all the time, while John's followers, John the Baptist's followers, sometimes fast and pray? They were trying to catch him out, of course. And Jesus responded, you don't give up eating while the bridegroom, that's himself, is with you. There'll be a time when I'm gone. He was obviously referring to his death. And then will be the time to fast. So what I learned from this is there's a time to eat and a time to fast. Both are good, but again, it's linked into it being a regular. And finally, in Acts chapter 13, verses 1 to 3, the church in Antioch were worshipping and fasting. And while they were doing so, the Holy Spirit spoke to them, telling them to set aside Barnabas and Saul for special work, for special ministry. Off they go on a journey. So, if you like, fasting there acts as a special time for receiving from God. So, just to summarize, fasting seems to have clear physical and spiritual benefits. The physical benefits in terms of blood sugar, blood pressure, inflammation, etc., weight loss we looked at earlier. But the spiritual benefits are definitely there. With God rewarding us when we fast, because He knows it's not easy. He knows it's not what we want to naturally do, especially those with my who enjoy their food and their drink. But it's a challenge that He will reward us, and He expects us to fast. So what I'm hoping as a result of this talk is not only am I speaking to myself here, perhaps even Andy B, but to our listeners, again, set yourself a challenge, fast in whatever way, whether it's 12 hours, 16 hours, whole day, and then get back to us and tell us what's happened. What have your experiences been? Bearing in mind that fasting should draw you closer to God. In the Bible, people worship and fast. It's not just meant to be fasting, feeling sorry for yourself. Don't let people know, just do it. And see how God rewards you, and then get back to us. There we go.
Awesome. Right. I have fasted a few times. I've done 2 7-day fasts, full 7-day fasts. So the first one was before I was married. So that's 30 years ago. But my wife was going for a job, and it was quite a big interview process. Well, not my wife then. And I really wanted to cover everything she was doing in prayer. So I actually had a full 7-day fast. I found a number of Christians from the church. Oh, you're being really stupid and really reckless. You shouldn't do that. That's nonsense. And all I could think was, have you even picked up a Bible? Because Jesus fasted for 40 days. I'm just doing 7 days. And I don't remember it being much of a struggle, except for a massive wobble about 3-4 days when I was really starting to think, what am I doing? I really want some food. So there was a big wobble. But to be honest, that was okay. I found myself a few years later trying to do some fasting, and I was getting headaches, thinking, oh, I can't be very well. I was on the PACE project at the time in Manchester. So I was getting headaches, and I was sneaking food to take. I didn't realize at the time to take paracetamol. I know now you can take it on an empty stomach. Hey, that's not relevant. So I was trying to sneak food, but I didn't know that headaches were a side effect. No one had really prepared me for it. And the other time we've done a full 7-day fast was for a friend's child who was ill, and my wife and I had some lovely time, and we came back and said, we want to pray for this child. How can we most show to God that we really are serious about praying for this child? So we prayed and fasted for 7 full days, because we really wanted to focus our prayers on that child. And that's what we did. And we've done it for a few people along the way. There was some friends of ours who couldn't have children. So we prayed, I think that was like a 5-day full fast. So just wanted to pray. It's like, I think for us, it was, this is what we can do. We can't help them not have a child. We can't help with this child who is ill, but we can pray. And that's good. But if we fast and pray, and it's like, it's really us saying, God, we're dead serious because we like our food.
Did you see some results from fasting?
Yes and no. The couple who couldn't have a baby still couldn't. The family with a child still had a child who was, they're doing really well now. But we didn't see like an immediate healing. Joe got the job. So I think what I found from fasting is it changed me much more than it changed the situation. And I think in a sense that's possible what God was trying to get me to see.
Right, that's very interesting. You say that. No, that's great. Thank you for mentioning that. That's great. And yes, it is. It can be done. And I fasted for a bit, not that. And I know I should do so more. My wife has been pushing me. And fascinating what you said about the Christians, because as you say, have you read the Bible? If someone was doing a 7-day fast, I wouldn't, give them a hard time. I'd just be saying, listen, good on you. I'm there for you. I'm praying for you. Well done. Fantastic. You're an example to the rest of us. I certainly wouldn't be giving you a hard time because that's just dumb.
Yeah. I mean, we've never talked about it. I don't think I've publicly said that we fasted because I've always taken seriously, don't tell other people. However, real life examples help. And, that's what we've done. We've done some, a couple of 7-day fasts. They were big. We've done a number of 5-day fasts for other people where we were never going to know the end scenario for them. But we just felt like, do you know what? If we pray and fast for 5 days, we got to the end and it felt like we'd prayed enough. You know, sometimes you can pray and you think, am I praying enough? We felt like at the end of 5 day fast, there was like God saying, okay, I've heard your prayer. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's been fixed. Have you heard of Dutch Sheets, the American, I think he's American pastor, big into prayer?
Oh, I haven't. No.
He's got a beautiful example of prayer because someone said, when is enough for praying? And he said, look, this is the picture he had. Imagine that in heaven, the floor is clustered with bowls. Every bowl is a
Mm,
different size. Some are like little thimbles, some are the size of a bath, some are the size of a swimming pool. But every time you pray, then a
mm.
tear from you, sorry, is placed by God in a bowl. And when the bowl is full, the prayer is answered. And I loved that illustration because he said the thing is, you don't know the size of the bowl that you're praying into. You don't know how many others are praying into that bowl. And that was kind of his way of saying, so keep praying until you feel satisfied. I've prayed as much as I need to because we can't pray for everything and we've got finite time.
And certainly prayer cups are mentioned in Revelation. So he's not just making this up. This is he's if you like he's developing what it tells us in Revelation. But that is very helpful. Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah, I mean, for us as a family, when we fasted, we tried to do like regular fasts. And because our boys really like having dinner with us, since we launched a radio station, that's kind of gone out the window. But until then, we used to have regular meals all the time together. So if we were fasting, Joe and I would frequently do once or twice a week, like a Monday and a Thursday. We'd do a two-third fast, is what we call it. So we would fast breakfast, fast lunch. We'd pray during those times, whether we were together or apart, for whatever we felt we needed to pray for at those times. And then the evening meal we'd eat with our boys because we really enjoyed that family time. And that felt at that time like it was really good. But I have to say, for me, it's relevant for you as a doctor, but when I've had some
Mm.
illnesses and drugs and stuff, I've got very wary of thinking, I really don't think it's wise to fast because these medication, beta blockers, I had blood pressure tablets and another one. And I just felt it would have been unwise to fast because it was messing with my body in so many ways. Even though I had fasted regularly, I didn't want to risk other issues because I wouldn't be able to read them because, well, I don't know what's going on.
And I think that's a good point. And if you're in doubt, then I think have a chat with your doctor and to see whether he or she thinks it's a wise thing to do. No, that's entirely reasonable. Which and again, in Ramadan, there are sort of caveats for Muslims, say, with diabetes, because they're aware it's not sensible in certain circumstances to fast. But we're talking as Christians, and I think God gives us common sense. He also gives us holy prompts, and if it's not sensible and it's not physically possible, fine. In that case, that's reasonable. But for the rest of us, where it's more a question of shall I? Oh, don't really fancy it. No, that's different.
Yeah.
And and it's the rest of us really that I'm talking to today,
I think,
including
yeah.
myself.
I think it's really easy to make the excuse. And I have checked with my wife a few times. Am I making an excuse not to fast? Because I don't like to fast because I like to eat my food. But I also really value from having fasted. And a few times I said, what do you think? And she said, I really don't think you should do it now because I'm on drugs or I'm coming off drugs. I was on beta blockers for a year, didn't need to be. They found I didn't have why I was on them. And then it took me months to sort of my body to adjust to not being on them. So again, Joe said, your body's messed up and it's just not wise right now, I don't think. And I've really missed fasting, but I want to get back into it. And I am, this has challenged me a good in a really positive way as it has for you, that fasting is really good. I have one question about weight loss, which occurred to me. Uh, because one of the things I've read about is if you're not eating enough food, and maybe this is another one of those myths, there's too many around. But if you're not eating enough food, then your body stores fat and you get fatter, even though you're eating, but you're not eating enough. So, where does calorie intake fit in with fasting, if that makes any sense?
You don't get fatter if you don't eat food. I mean that's there's no logic and there's no medical basis behind that. Um, Losing weight when you don't eat food is not a simple science, and because your metabolism, people have different metabolic rates, the rates which they break down food, and different body sizes. So if you don't eat food, ultimately yes, everybody will lose weight, but at different rates. But if you don't eat food, you cannot gain weight. That's just unless you've got a disease like cardiac disease where you're putting on fluid. So that's a disease process, but you don't gain weight if you're not eating. That's Yeah, there's no logic behind that.
It's a myth, but we've just. I mean, I like the fact we can clear up myths because they gather momentum. They sound so good because so many people say it, and you think, but it doesn't make any sense. But everyone's shouting about it. Then we have you to make it clear.
Yeah. No, that doesn't make sense. I think people get frustrated when they don't eat much and don't lose weight, and that's a whole discussion in itself.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where if you eat less, you will lose weight. End of story.
Right. Another one. I was thinking about the guy, your daughter's church, the pastor who had milk for a month. One of the things that I found is that if I don't eat, I get really cold. It's one of the things for me. I know if I'm cold, there's a few reasons. One, I'm ill because I'm usually a t-shirt guy in the winter. So if I'm cold, generally I'm very ill or I'm not eating. And it's just me understanding my body. So one of the ways that I counteract fasting is I only have hot drinks during the day. So quite frankly, I'll drink nothing but tea for the day because otherwise I'm getting much colder than I normally would. That's just me.
I've asked my friend Andy C why you had hot water rather than cold water, for example.
Mm.
And yeah, maybe it was. I didn't ask it, but look, yeah, from what you say, that's interesting. It may simply be because he was quite a thin guy, and he would have, he probably would have got cold in the winter as well. So yeah, that's good. That's a very good point.
Well, I've been criticised for it. Oh, it's not a real fast, but I think there's a degree of, well, it's an individual relationship with God. Fasting is important, and if I'm going to fast, then I'm not an idiot, and God's given me a brain. Therefore, I need to use that. And if I'm going to fast, and that means I can fast, then I don't think there's an awful lot of calories in a few little bits of milk in the bottom of a cup of tea.
Sure, and I think one has to be we have to be sensible here. And the great thing is that fasting should draw us closer to God because we should spend time that maybe we would have been eating, actually praying and focusing on God and worshiping. That's the message behind it. Really, is it should draw us closer to God. God's not being rough with us, for no good reason. He's saying this is a discipline, and it's hard, like any discipline. So do it well. Otherwise, it's not much point.
No, you said you were challenged. So what's going to change for you? Cold water dipping you haven't done, but what's changing for you for fasting?
Well, that's what I need to talk about. Maybe perhaps in relation to Easter, even if it's simply just missing one meal a day, and particularly if it's say breakfast, then that would achieve the 16-hour fast. But just simply by missing breakfast and not having coffee and biscuits at coffee time. But if I'm to do that, then I need to do it with my focus on Jesus. So if I can do that, yes, then I could say, well, I've done a 16-hour fast. And that's the challenge for me to think, okay, that's not just to think, but say, right, line in the sand, that's it. I'm going to do it. And so that's my plan.
Yeah, I want to get back into fasting. I've got some more tests for my old-time heart issues and whether they can be fixed or not. So I'm hanging off a little bit just while they're doing that in a few weeks' time. But I really have missed fasting because it's something that I've really enjoyed. And I think you make a really good point that you don't just fast just because you cannot eat, because that's not such a helpful thing. But if we're fasting with a purpose, which for me as a Christian and it has to be in order to either hear from God more clearly because we're getting our own selfish needs out of the way, or because we want to sort of, I say in a sense, not necessarily theologically great, but show God that we're serious, which means sometimes we have to do stuff that we're not happy about, because then it's not so much about God seeing that we're serious, it's about us showing for ourselves to some extent that we're serious. But one bit I loved was from the 40 days of Jesus fasting. There was a different perspective from what you said. And he was hungry. Really strikes me because Jesus was God. Jesus was man. But he didn't get any help. There were no back end cheats. There was no black market free food from the angels. He was hungry because he was really God and he was really man. And if it didn't say, and he was hungry, then we might say, well, was he really man? Was it that big a deal? But it really was.
Point. Yeah. That's it. Might seem like a throwaway line, but actually it's a very important line. Exactly. As you said, we know that Jesus experienced all the emotions that we did. And, he was tempted, he was cross, he was sad, he cried, he was angry, and he was hungry. This is Jesus, the man, as Jesus God.
Right. So just recapping, because we've done loads, just to wrap this up a little bit. If we're going to fast 12 hours is good, but 16 hours is kind of the golden, that's a much better fast for the health benefits.
That's it. I think 12 hours is, I'll be honest with you, is barely a fast. It just means that you don't eat from your evening meal breakfast. It just about counts, but it's only just. Whereas 16 hours means you've missed a meal. And I think, if you're going to have a fast, really, it's got to be you've got to miss at least one meal. I would think. So yes, I think 60, and that's why you get the better benefits at 16.
Oh, one more. You talked about autophagy. Is that right?
Autophagy, correct?
I was just thinking about God's creation of us and how He designed us to be, and I loved that you picked this up. That at 16 hours, the body starts to use up and get rid of, rather, the old and the damaged cells. And I love how when we do things God's way, it's a win-win, isn't it?
It's a win-win. And the danger is, and of course, the devil says to us, "Oh, you don't want to think of the lose-lose here," whereas actually it's in the Bible because it's a win-win. And then the science, sort of, thousands of years later, discovers, oh look what happens. And yeah, man's discovering what God has said. Yeah, this was a good idea.
I was chatting with a Florida-based marine biologist who's a Christian as well, and she was saying what she loves in science is all these latest discoveries. She's saying, it's there in the Psalms. God said about the hydrological cycle long before we even knew it was there. And I love it.
Absolutely. It's in there. The exact science may not be in there, but the picture's in there. So when people say something, I think, yeah, I've known about that for ages, and it's in the book. Just read the book.
This has been, I think, my favorite one so far. If I'm honest, I've loved this one. There's be some highlights for me. Sleep and caffeine, because I now drink coffee. And my older son now drinks coffees as well because he's had a stomach issue, and I finally got him to drink it, and he's getting a little better.
Praise God.
Right. Thank you, Richard. If you've got any thoughts or questions about fasting, then please get in touch with us here, and we can further get on this. Have you fasted? What are your perspectives on fast? How long have you fasted if you haven't? How did you find it? Those would be great answers to find out about. But yes, if you've got any more stuff for Richard, email us here in the studio. hello@pure247radio.org. hello@pure247radio.org. Richard, thank you. Do we know what we're doing next week?
Well, we might want to. We haven't had questions for a little bit. Maybe we'll have a question session. And then I've just discovered something in the paper. Interestingly, again, man discovering what God reveals, which is that singing is very good for us. Now, Christians, we reckon we can sing, and we like singing. But again, there's a bit of science behind it. So yeah, I thought I might move on to singing in a couple of weeks' time. But let's have some Q&A next time, and then we'll take it. We'll move on to singing after that.
Brilliant. Well, Richard, as ever, so grateful for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. All the best.